Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Conversation, a series exploring the makings of our exhibition. In this case, we're talking about deepfakes, art and its double, an exhibition curated and led by curator and director Professor Sarah Kenderdine at EPFL Pavilions, Amplifier for Art, Science and Society at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, EPFL Lausanne, an exhibition on view until May 1st, 2022. My name is Monica Antohi. I'm communications lead with EPFL Pavilions, and today I have the honor of speaking with Deborah Papiernik, Senior VP, New Business and Strategic Alliances at Ubisoft. The reason her and I are speaking today is because of our installation in our Deepfakes Art and Double with the Notre Dame de Paris virtual experience. So let me introduce you to Deborah, and let's have a conversation. Good morning, Deborah.
Good morning, Monica.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a privilege to speak with you because, first of all, the installation itself, it's fantastic. It's coming out of Assassin's Creed. We're talking about Notre Dame de Paris. It's a quite immersive experience in the installation in the exhibition, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But I want to, we'll talk about all the other stuff around it as well. But let's start with the basics. Let's start with who you are. How did you end up at Ubisoft? You've been with them for 25 years, and you're senior VP of a very cool department. Yeah, we'd like to know more about a little bit about your journey and about what you do on a day-to-day basis and what your team is focused on. So let's start there.
Sure. So Ubisoft is a French company, and it's one of the leading developers and publishers of video games worldwide. But more than just creating games, we create worlds, and worlds where people can live different types of experiences. And we're creating brands such as Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, the Tom Clancy series, Rainbow Six, Watch Dogs, and also games like Just Dance or The Rabbids. And so we do have, our core business is really games for all types of platform, PC, console, mobile, cloud now. But we've always had activities that come add other types of experiences. We have a film and television division. We've always done books and comics and plushes and you name it, everything you can imagine that we can do with our brands and with our content. Now, I've been with Ubisoft for 25 years. I've started in marketing. I have a business background.
Right.
In France, an MBA. Did that for 3 years. Then for 10 years, I did business development, where I was acquiring rights for games so that we can enrich our catalog. Ubisoft was born as a distribution company, and little by little, we turned into a development company. But at the beginning, we were only distributing games for others. So I was looking for games from Japanese companies, American companies, small developers in Eastern Europe, so that we can be their publisher and developer and distributor. Then I had supervised the production for 5 years for games that were developed with external studios. So I had a whole team of engineers, graphists, designers that were working with external resources. And 6 years ago, the CEO of the company asked me to create a new department and turn some strange projects that no one knew what to do with, that were individual initiatives within the group, and turn them into businesses and try to see if we can develop new businesses that we didn't tackle at all. One of them was an attraction. It was a simulation of a roller coaster with a virtual reality headset linked to a motion player. Okay.
Oh, Lord.
But it was just a prototype. It was a fantastic experience. Like, first time I tried it, I say, wow, what a cool job. You know, like you got to do a roller coaster when you're at work. But it was just a prototype. But then to make it on the market, we ended up partnering with a company who's actually doing arcade cabinets and who knows how to produce them and how to sell them. And now it's a fantastic business. And we do have an attraction that's in small parks where you can do a roller coaster experience without having to queue in a big park. The other initiative was a girl from the communication department who was passionate about live entertainment. And she went to the CEO and said, well, Ubisoft, we want to become a destination for great entertainment, But when you think about the companies who are already a destination for great entertainment, like Disney, they're active on live entertainment, and today we are not, and we should go there because it's another way to make our brands shine, to talk to our gamers but also to non-gamers, and give another approach to our brand and say, yeah, okay, go ahead. Today we're talking about a lot about intrapreneurships, like people within companies who are creating other companies. And the first time someone told me about entrepreneurship, I said, oh, you mean what we've always done at Ubisoft? This is how we work. Everything comes from this field. You have an idea for a game, you have an idea for something else, just talk about it, and maybe it's going to generate interest, and maybe we'll give you the means to start working on it. And after 3 months, 6 months, or a year, either it becomes something or it doesn't, and that's okay. But everything comes from sales. So everything basically is
very cool.
Intrapreneurship. So I took these 2 projects, and that's how I created the new business department. And we did turn Just Dance into a live show. We did a tour in the US, and then there was COVID and everything, so it was hard to do a real tour beyond this pilot tour of 4 weeks. But we're still in contact with lots of people, and I hope we can turn that into a resident show or a turning show somewhere. And then based on that, I started developing other things, just little by little, by the people I met, etc. And because I have a small development team within my team. When I say small, it's really small. Like it's 6 people. So just 2 programmers, a graphist, an animator, a narrative designer, and a sound designer. So it's really the basic of what you can think a video games team can be. But they're very good. They can deliver a lot. And in that team, most people have a lot of experience. So they do the job of more than just one person. And they're very engaged in their project. So they're the ones who developed that virtual reality ride, that simulation of a roller coaster I talked about. So they know how to develop games. And we had opportunity to work on the Age-Old City exhibition that you already mentioned in the conversation, because that's how we have a reproduction of Palmyra, etc., in virtual reality. And with this exhibition, my team created a virtual reality experience of 3 minutes where one step in the museum felt like one step in the souk of Aleppo or among the ruins in Palmyra, etc. And we got the model from the University of Lausanne as well for that. So we already had
that's the exhibit right next to the Notre Dame exhibit.
Exactly. So we had already this experience with museums, and we know it's possible to bring virtual reality to museums. And VR is great for empathy, to create empathy, so that people feel with the notion of presence, the notion of being there. And suddenly it's only the emotions that count. Sometimes you don't even need to tell people anything. They just have to live the experience. And with this notion of presence, you have the impression of being there. So after the fire of Notre Dame, everybody in the world was very emotional. Like everybody cried, even the people who were not Catholic, even people who were not in Paris or not French. The world cried for Notre Dame and was worried about Notre Dame. And everybody started posting souvenirs or visits of Notre Dame, videos or photos. And the gamers among them pulled out their Assassin's Creed Unity game, a game about the French Revolution released 5 years before. They put it back in their console, in their PC, and they posted videos of gameplay. Maybe we can show some images.
Let's do that.
That was all over the internet. That was on TV everywhere, but even on CNN in the US, everybody talked about it, to the point that some journalists even said that Ubisoft is going to help with the reconstruction because we have a 3D model. Well, not exactly, because our model is not 100% exact, and there are some models that are much more exact, but ours, it required 5,000 hours of work, of graphic work. It's not scanning or photogrammetry or anything like that. It's really graphic work done by a graphist in Montreal, based on photos and maps, and also a visit to Paris. And it's very emotional, it's very beautiful. So what I did is, first Ubisoft gave money for the reconstruction, like a responsible company. We also made the game available for free, so people could download the game and keep it for free. We have this beautiful model of Notre Dame. We want to make it available to as many people as possible. I want my mother to be able to play. I want my son to be able to play. I want also my uncle who could play because he's more than 18, but he doesn't like gaming. So maybe he doesn't want to play Assassin's Creed, and that's okay. You don't have to play. But I want to make the model available to anyone beyond the gamers. So I asked my team to get the 3D model from the game, where we had a proprietary engine to develop our game, export that into as a 3D asset, and use a virtual reality engine like Unity to create a virtual reality visit of Notre Dame. And just a couple months after the fire, we already had this experience where we have the 3D model of Notre Dame, but it's not alone. It's within Paris. It has birds flying. It has some other activities so that you don't feel alone in the cathedral. And in terms of sound, we also licensed music played on the organ of Notre Dame 6 months before the fire. And we showed it to many people, including the people who are actually working on the reconstruction. The stonemason, the stained glass window makers, and the architect, and even the general in charge, and the Archbishop of Paris. And it all talked about emotion. They know our model is not 100% right, but that's okay. And by the way, you saw the images. The game is about the French Revolution, but we chose knowingly we made an anachronic choice. We represented the Notre Dame from Viollet-le-Duc. That is 70 years after the French Revolution.
Right.
The reason we did that is because we needed Notre Dame to be recognizable worldwide, and without the spire, Notre Dame is not recognizable. You see it when you pass by Notre Dame.
Without the gargoyles, it's not recognizable either. So
exactly.
Before that, 18th century didn't have that feature. So
yeah, and the other thing is because it's Assassin's Creed, you know, the assassin has to climb everywhere. And if you don't have the spire, then you're frustrated because you want to climb higher. So that's why we made that choice. And it's okay to do that choice because we're entertainers. We're not scientific. But in all we do, we work a lot. As we develop the game, we work a lot with historians and people like experts for like social science and then geography and like everything, society, philosophers. Yeah, so we do our homework, and there are things that we can transmit like 100% correct, and some things we have to take some liberty, but they do the same exact things in movies because we need to keep the interest of the gamers. And it's like a painter. You know, a painter, the difference between a painting and a photography can bring some emotions and it's exact. A painting is sometimes based on reality, but then there's interpretation because you want to transmit some other kind of emotion. Well, I think it's the same thing with games, but we are very rooted in the reality. So we presented the experience to many museums, and since July, it's present in the archaeological crypt. The archaeological crypt that's below Notre Dame, so under Notre Dame, like we couldn't find closer to Notre Dame. And they have an exhibition currently about Notre Dame from Victor Hugo, the writer who wrote the book Notre Dame, and who put Notre Dame back into the heart of the French people. Because with the French Revolution, people were not attached to Notre Dame anymore. So in this experience that we developed, the VR experience that you see images now, you have 10 different points of view. It's a 4 minutes experience, 10 different points of view, and you're teleported from one point of view to the other, inside, outside of Notre Dame, and even on the top of Notre Dame, and you finish with a tour in a balloon. So you have an impression you're there, and you can actually walk. It's a 3 meter by 3 experience. You can actually walk with a VR headset. It's also available for free on the VR stores if you have a VR headset. Now, when we talked to Sarah, who was preparing the deepfake exhibition, we're trying to think, okay, is there any model that we can maybe give her that she can do something with it? And she loved the Notre Dame experience. So we provided her with the 3D model And instead of using a VR headset, she developed another technique where you're in front of that multi-direction screen. And here you're not walking, but you're controlling the way you're moving inside the experience. So here you're using the model differently. Um, but it's still that same model with that same Paris around it. It's just the way you're walking inside it is different. So they did a great job at EPFL of like finding yet another use of our 3D model.
Right, and it's a 3D model, yes, but you're in it with this cave-like presentation. You're in it. You're above the ground. You feel like you're lifting up when you're using the joystick to go up visually. There's a movement. There's a feeling that you're in there, flying around the Notre Dame, and you can hear the noises of Paris once you go outside. You can hear the horses' hoofs. You can hear the people in the market. You can hear the birds going by. It's quite immersive. And again, it's not about historical accuracy for a reconstruction project, but it like you were talking about, it elicits some emotion, and it connects with people at a level that you weren't quite expecting, right? Were you guys expecting that when you started creating these experiences? Were you expecting to see this emotional connection with what you're presenting, with what you're scanning? Because like you said, these are not photogrammetry experiences. These are not creations based on scans. These are you have your designers literally building worlds. So it's mind-blowing, the connection we make with art in a way, because that's what this is at this point. The emotional connection there, was that something that you were expecting?
Well, when we do games, we want to do games that are immersive, that people feel that they're immersed in the game. And because, well, it's just immersive experiences. And immersive doesn't mean virtual reality, it means just that
No.
you're inside that world. And with VR or with a cave, you add another dimension because you don't have the constraint of the screen. And the way you move inside the experience is different because either your body is engaged or you control your movement differently. And virtual reality is very particular in that. I'm not working in neuroscience, but I've heard neuroscientists saying that in virtual reality, there are two reasons why when you live an experience, you have an impression, it's an experience. It's not something that you watched, but it goes to your brain to the same place of things that you've actually lived.
Yes.
So, and the two reasons are, one is that there's no frame around it. When you turn your head, it's everywhere. That's one reason. The other reason is because your body is engaged. If you move, then you move inside the experience. And because of that, you kind of trick your mind, and it becomes an experience. And that's why it can be used for therapy. For example, it's used for PTS, post
PTSD.
yeah,
PTSD,
it's
post-traumatic
used
stress
for
disorder.
that. It's used for phobia, like people who are phobic about, I don't know, like spiders or taking the plane, because then they have an impression that they've lived something. Let me tell you about my first experience in VR. At the beginning of VR development, just for any console or new piece of hardware and software, there are plenty of people within Ubisoft. We're 20,000 people at Ubisoft. So there are plenty of people who, like, in addition to their work, they pick on the technology. You know, like most of the people at Ubisoft are geeks, so they're going to pick up on every tech, and they're very engaged, and they want to do more and more and different and better and stuff. So some of them picked on VR, got a VR headset, and started developing experiences. And at one point, we put everybody together in Montreal. That we have an internal developers conference. We put everybody together, and they could show each other their prototypes. And I was there, and I tried a prototype of a game where they didn't explain much. They just gave me the controllers, put on the headset, and suddenly I was in the mountain by night. I saw a plane that was crashed next to me. There was a fire, and I was alone by night in the mountain. And I hear a voice that tells me, with a helicopter, that tells me, well, hold on 3 minutes and we're almost there. It's just 3 minutes. Hold on. So I understand what I have to do. I just have to survive for 3 minutes. And then the wolves are attacking me. So the wolves
Ooh.
come. So I pick a log from the fire and I launch it on the wolf. And then I take something else, a piece of stone, and I try to defend myself. And so I was like moving all the time. And then there was this beautiful wolf that I kicked. It was so beautiful. It was like blue eyes. So I bent and I touched him because like he felt so soft. There was no wolf at all, but I had an impression it felt soft and beautiful. And that other wolf that surprised me, I kicked him. Like physically, I kicked him. And I was so agitating and I was getting hot. I wanted to turn off the fire. And I was laughing at the same time. It was so short. And I've been at Ubisoft for 25 years and I'm not a gamer. And suddenly with this experience, I realized the potential of VR. Like if it can do this to a non-gamer, then it means it can work with everyone. It's fantastic. And it was in February in Montreal. 2 hours later, I was in the street in Montreal. It was night. There was snow. I was like running late for a restaurant, and there was some snow fell from a building in front of me. And I put my hands like, I was like, "Where are the wolves?" And again, I was laughing myself. Like I had an impression I have lived that experience, and I had to
Yeah.
fight against the wolves again. It's like, and all that made me say like there are plenty of things we can do in VR, and that's why I did so much in VR afterwards.
And then we're going to talk about the metaverse, but let's talk about some actual projects
Yeah,
that you're working on right now, and then we'll talk about metaverse because
sure.
I want to know what you
So
guys are doing there.
because the Notre Dame thing is not finished. About a year ago, Jean-Jacques Hano, who's a French filmmaker but who's well known internationally, came to see us because he was creating a film about the fire of Notre Dame. It's called Notre Dame in Fire. It's going to release in a few months. And he said, "Well, I know that Ubisoft has some attachment to the cathedral. Do you want to do a game about my movie?" It was just like about a year before the release of the movie, so it didn't make sense. Like developing a game today takes like if you want to do a real big game, like a triple A game, in about 4 years, about like up to 1,000 people, it doesn't work. Like we can't do a good game in 1 year. So I say, no, we can't really do a game. But then I say, well, I have another idea. We already have three virtual reality escape games. So that's a 1 hour escape game that you play in groups, 2 to 4 people, families, friends, and you go to locations, just as you go for regular escape games. But this one, in the location, you put on a VR headset and you see each other in the experience. We have one about Assassins within Egypt, one about Greece, and one about Prince of Persia. So these are Ubisoft brands. We have a network of more than 600 locations, escape rooms or arcade places that are operating these escape games. And people pay their ticket, go there, just like any other escape. And say,
By the
well, we
way,
don't have time for a full game, but we
side
can do
note.
an escape.
Sorry, we'll talk about it later. Sorry, go
Um,
ahead.
so we sorry. So what we did is we talked to Pate, who's producing the movie, and to Jean-Jacques Hano, say, well, that's what we can do. What do you think? We can do it. We can do it in 12 months. We already have that network. It's a different kind of game, but it's still a game. And with this game, you're going to be able to be an actor. Instead of just being a spectator of the fire, you can actually do things. You can save the relics, and you have plenty of puzzles to find the relics and save the relics. Then you have to find your way with being in the cathedral with the flames and everything, and just fight the fire and save Notre Dame. So we went to visit Jean-Jacques Hano on the set of the movie. He was reconstructing parts of the cathedral to then burn it for the movie. Actually put everything in fire. He had so many companions, people who are sculptor, like working with stone and working like carving stone, and people who are working on stained glass, and people who are working all these coming, like jobs were like very artistic jobs and
Right,
antique
right, right.
jobs, were creating cathedrals and
Artisans.
stuff. He had them on the set, to recreate elements that then he would set on fire to reproduce the fire of Notre Dame. So see, you're going to be in groups, everybody wears a headset, and then you're going to be inside Notre Dame. And for the firemen, it must have been at the same time frightening and wonderful to see fire cascading from the top of Notre Dame. So it was having a terrible experience to see that. You're going to be able to climb, and you have to work in teams. You work in group. You can't do it by yourself. And you can communicate with your friends at the same time. You talk. And you have 1 hour maximum, so you have to go fast.
And you have to work in a team, which is
Yes.
very cool. There's not that many games that like that. I mean, there are games that work in teams, but it's good to see more of that. It's good to see teamwork, and not just in a shoot 'em up kind of game, but in a let's do something good together kind of mentality kind of idea. So when is that game coming out? You
It's
said you've
gonna
been working
come
on.
out. It's gonna come out around the same time period as the movie, but not exactly the same date. And also, the movie is probably not going to release at the same date everywhere worldwide. But because we already have this network of existing partners, as soon as we say the game is ready, they're all going to get it at the same time. So probably like early spring, something like that. And
Right.
because we're currently developing it, we invited the firemen and firewomen who were on the fire, like the day of the fire, to try our experience and help us make it even more realistic in terms of representation of the firemen, so the costumes, the attitude, the language that they use, etc. So
Yeah.
that's it's not going to be as realistic as a movie, of course, but as close as possible to the reality.
And it's good because you're putting it out. It's good that you're not there, like people are not being burned alive, which is hopefully not happening in a game. But you have an hour to get out of the cathedral and to save as many relics as possible. It's a cool game. I'm looking forward to seeing it come out. All right, so that kind of takes care of the universe of Notre Dame. It's been in development for a long, long time. You guys have been working on the idea for a long, long time. You were saying it takes about 4 years to build a proper, a solid game. What are you working on currently? What's some of the projects that are close to your heart, and what's something that speaks to you?
So there are plenty of different things. For example, because of all the work that we do at Ubisoft, when we create our game, all our work with historians and stuff, our worlds are rather accurate from a historical, geographical, societal point of view. And there were lots of historians who were using our games in class, even though it was mature rated, so they weren't really supposed to. But they were making videos and showing videos to kids to illustrate like the French Revolution, the American Revolution, and then the Italian Renaissance, and like all the different periods that we covered in Assassin's Creed. And they were asking us, well, can you do a version for us that has no combat, no pressure of time, that we can just see this world and show it to the kids in support of our history lessons? And at the same time, our development teams, they wanted their families to be able to play the game, even though they were not above 18 or even though they were not gamers. So Ubisoft decided to develop discovery tours. So after we developed Assassin's Creed in Egypt, we released the Discovery Tour Egypt. It's 7 hours of content, educational content. So the world of Assassin's Creed is the one that we created for Assassin's Creed Origins, the one set in Egypt. And we added elements from museums, from the Louvre or other museums, to give like more attachment to the reality, objects, etc. And with teachers, with researchers, historians, we created tours so that, for example, when you want to learn about the mummification process, you don't read about it or watch it or just hear about it. You actually walk around the people who are actually doing all the mummification, so you learn by seeing them or hearing them talking between them, just as if you were in Egypt and just visiting the scene. Same thing for the pyramids, same thing for plenty of other things. And then we did it again for Assassin's Creed in Greece. And we released it also in November for Assassin's Creed in the Viking Age. So now we have this educational module that is for free for gamers, and that is only 20 euros for the non-gamers who only want to buy this content. And it's pure educational content. It is used in some schools. And we're also using, there's this big initiative in France called Microfolie, where the government, the Ministry of Culture, is putting up a big budget to create places, like physical places with digital content that they have negotiated with all kinds of museums, the Louvre and other big museums, Versailles, etc. So they have all this content. And to this content, all these pieces of art, like digital pieces of art, we added the 3 discovery tours, Notre Dame in virtual reality, and also a tool that we created to teach kids the basic of programming. With the rabbits coding, it's a little bit like Scratch, but with the rabbits, and you learn the basic of algorithm. And we put that in the catalog. So now every small city in France or even abroad who wants to open a Microfolie can open that space. It can be 50 square meters, can be 200 square meters, it's whatever. They have access for free to all the catalog of content. They know exactly what they have to buy in terms of PC, tablets, or VR headsets. And it's free for the people. The schools can come. And the beautiful thing is that very often the kids are going with their teacher during the week, and over the weekend they bring their parents. And it's free access to culture. And I love this project. And I love that we were able to give them so much content that has really educational value.
That's a fantastic part, but the good part about it, well, there's many good parts about it, but what I like about it the most is that it's not light content. You worked really hard on this content. And you're working with scientists, you're working with archaeologists, with probably architects, clearly architects. You're working with with the psychologist, probably to deliver it in such a way that it makes sense for children to experience it. And it's you're going way beyond game creation and world creation. You're and it's more, it sounds a lot like preserving and engaging with culture. So that seems kind of the driving force. Like I'm hearing you're trying to bring culture out, and it's kind of weird that it's coming out of a game
But
company.
Ubisoft's mission is not to make games. Our mission is to enrich players' life with memorable experiences. So we try to enrich their lives, and we know that just by gaming, you enrich people's life. When you, like, even animals play to learn. Like, we need to play. It's the best way to learn. So that's one thing. So
Fastest
by
way to
playing,
learn.
you're learning, okay? But by playing, you also gain self-confidence, because gaming is one of the rare places where you can fail and try again. And by failing, you learn. And it's even okay to fail in front of your friends. There are not many places in the world where you accept to fail in front of your friends and no one's going to make fun of you. People are going to be happy and happy with you. And then you start again. And then the next time you win. You lost the first time, you win the next time, and that's okay. And then there's a socializing part of it as well. During the pandemic, the first lockdown, the World Health Organization launched a whole campaign that was called Play a Part Together. And lots of game publishers gave games for free for that campaign, so that people can play games at home and either socialize within their home with their families or socialize online. Lots of people were very isolated, and by gaming, they created socialization. So the World Health Organization doesn't always love game, but during the lockdown, they loved us.
It made sense. You're right. It had the sense of separation, a sense of being alone in a very cold and non-moving world. There were no cars going around. There was no buses. There was nothing going on. And all of a sudden, you're in your apartment or house or uh, by yourself without seeing your friends, without anything. And like you were talking about in the beginning, the games bring this emotional, empathy kind of engagement with your environment. And by having the opportunity to engage with your friends, even if it's not in a face to face, but through a digital experience, it's still triggers emotion. It still triggers this feeling of belonging, this feeling of being together. And yeah, it was great what the WHO did, and it's great that you guys participated in that as well. So you were talking about education for kids. You were talking about bridging that, going from a mature game to creating content for children. What other projects do you have that are doing that?
Yeah, I can give you another example. For example, documentaries, when you do a scientific documentary or historical documentary, um, if you only show scientists or historians, it's not very fun for the people. Like, you're going to go pride in time and no one's going to watch your film. So what they do very often is they go and look at if there are movies that illustrated the same topic. And this way they get images from movies to come and illustrate the scientific purpose. So there was this French company called Little Big Story, a producer of documentary, who wanted to do a documentary about the role of women during prehistory. And because there are some scientific discoveries that show that women they were not staying at home and like sweeping the cave while the men were fighting the mammoth. They were actually very active, and they brought 70% of the resources of the household. And they were contributing, and the society was actually organized by age and physical capacity more than they didn't care really about if you were a man or a woman. And actually, it was more the grandmothers who were taking care of the children, and they didn't have that many children either. So they
You
wanted
didn't
to
have
do
time
this.
to have children back then. You didn't. You were running. You were surviving. You didn't have time to have that many children.
So they wanted to do this documentary. They realized that no one had done a documentary about women in prehistories. They presented it to France Télévisions, the major French channel, who said, "Yeah, we love the idea. Great, you can be on the Thursday night. We have this science, slot for
Yeah.
it's the biggest science documentary slot." But how are you going to illustrate that? Because there's no movie. If you look at the movies about prehistory, none of them is showing a positive role of women. She's very submissive. She's only like taking care of her kids, doing nothing really like helpful for the household. Well, taking care of your kids is useful, but she was actually doing more. So one of the co-scenarists of the documentary, he said, I know where to find images, because he was a consultant for Ubisoft on the game Far Cry Primal, released a few years before. And Far Cry is a brand that is also maturated in this action game, very gamer, maybe more gamer than Assassin's Creed, and that is not known for reproducing history or anything like that. But because this episode was set during prehistory, we did that same work I told you about, that we worked with all the experts, so that we know what were the animals, what did the trees look like, what were they wearing, what was their daily life, etc., to create a prehistory that feels like the real prehistory. And said, we should go and talk to Ubisoft. So they came to us and we said, yeah, we'll help you. So they created all their documentary, and the creator of the documentary, he sat next to a technician at Ubisoft, and they used this specific camera that we have in our games, but only like on the development side. It's a debug
Yeah.
mode. It's a camera that works a little bit like a drone, that you can have the camera go inside the game, inside the 3D world, just as if you were using it in a real world. So you're piloting the camera and you can film anything you want. And you can
Wow.
even tell the game, here I want a woman who's painting on the wall. Here I want a woman who's putting a log on the fire. Here I want this and that. So you can direct the game to do whatever you want, and then you have this camera.
Very cool.
And actually, their first spending on the documentary was buying a PlayStation 4 to play the game, because the creator of the documentary had to know the game, the same way he would study a real landscape before filming. Well, he studied more virtual landscape, so he knew the games in and out. He played for like 100 hours to understand the game and know what he wanted to film. And in the end, we have for a 90-minute documentary, we have 17 minutes of Far Cry Primal, which is huge. It's the first time that a video game is illustrating a scientific documentary with that much content.
So this is the Far Cry.
Yeah, these are images from Far Cry.
And it's within the documentary.
Yeah, that's actually the introduction of the documentary. So you see, these are actual statuettes that were found from the Paleolithic, and then you have images from Far Cry. And a documentary could create some CGI images, but the cost of CGI images, the minute of CGI of that quality is huge. It's like probably between 100 and 200,000 euros. So they don't have a budget to do this kind of quality. So by filming inside of a game, it was just some time for a technician to film, and then they had to put everything together, but they didn't have to create anything from start. And it was also affordable for them, while creating from the start wouldn't have been affordable for them.
This is stunning in terms of visual. It's not just visually that's stunning, it's the meaning behind it that's I like very much. I'm kind of attached to that meaning.
Actually, everybody loved it. Well, France Télévisions loved it as well. It's an international co-production, so it was already broadcasted in the US on PBS. It's going to be in Canada, I think it's in March. It's going to be on NHK in Japan, like everywhere. Like it's really an international documentary, because the topic is international. The role of women during prehistory, that's not French, it's just international. And also it's trendy in the good way. To just revisit, because the thing is, the people who studied the subjects of prehistory in the 19th century, for example, it was mainly men,
male scientists.
And we have with lots of sciences and periods where they forgot, like women were not involved, so they forgot to look at what women were doing at that time. So it's very interesting to revisit, and then it resonates with what's happening today, where we're just equal. So it's
more or less. More or less. Depends on the country. Yeah.
So we before the documentary was broadcast on TV, there were quite a few articles in the press, because it was like Me Too at prehistorical time, and illustrated by the video game. So it was like a new take on documentary production. And the result was great, because the first broadcast had 1.4 million viewers, while usually on that Thursday night scientific documentary slot, it's only half of that. So it did double than what it usually does. So it's great. So, and there are plenty of other things that we're doing. We also have 7 capsules of 6 minutes on the kids' web channel linked to France Télévisions. So they took images from the documentary, recut it by theme. Woman as an artist, woman as a caregiver, woman as a food hunter, whatever. So theme by theme, with a different vocabulary, so that it fits with kids. And we also said, well, the immersion of the documentary is great, but it's on a flat screen. What about putting you in the very shoes of Lady Sapiens? Like, you play the role of Lady Sapiens, and for that, we needed VR. So we decided to develop a virtual reality experience where you are in the shoes of Lady Sapiens, so you meet other people from prehistory, from the Paleolithic. You draw in the cave. Everybody
cave wall.
We all dreamt of putting our hand on the
sacrilege. We can't do that. Okay.
And then you carve your weapon and you go and fight the mammoth. And for that, instead of going from scratch, we exported assets from our game Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, from Far Cry. So we exported trees and animals and weapons, like anything we could export to create this VR experience in a more efficient way. And here you can see a few images as well.
Let's check out.
So you can see your reflection in the river. Here you meet someone, she's talking to you, and you have to reproduce that same gesture. In the game, Far Cry even created a language that is valid, from like a scientifically valid, that could have existed. Here you paint in the cave. There's a scene where you create your weapon and you end up fighting the mammoth. Yeah, here.
It is beautiful, and it feels quite engaging. The experience, seeing your hands and being able to replicate the movements and having to replicate the movements so you can probably go forward. It seems quite engaging in terms of participation.
Yeah, it's a 12-minute experience, and it's presented. This is not available on the stores. It's presented at the National History Museum in Paris, and we're also talking to many other museums everywhere who have a link. It's either Natural History Science Museum or things linked to Prehistory. There's also a site in the southwestern France called Paléosite of Saint-Césaire, which is famous because we have traces of presence of Sapiens and Neanderthal on that site. So maybe not together, but maybe together. We don't know. But we have traces of both of them.
Of
so
both.
yeah. So it's a kind of like a museum with visits on site, etc. So in that site, they have a 12-minute version of the documentary Lady Sapiens. They have the VR experience. And because they notice animals, they asked us if we could do another movie focused on animals. And they wanted an educational movie so that kids can learn about prehistorical animals. So the creator of the documentary Lady Sapiens, he wrote a story because he knew the game by heart. He wrote a story. So Pierrette is going in the forest to get some medical plants because her son is sick. And along the way, she meets animals. And every time she meets an animal, there's a zoom on the animal. So here you have another 12-minute film of CGI quality that no museum can develop. Way too expensive and way too long to do. But they have it for a fraction of the cost.
And this is the Pierrette's trip into the woods for medicinal plants.
Exactly. And this is filmed inside the game. There's no rework. There's nothing except for the talking and those scientific information that you see on screen here. But we didn't redo anything. We just filmed inside the game. So Far Cry is a first-person game, meaning that when you're playing the game, you only see your hands and you have the action, but from the point of view of the principal character of the game. But here you saw Pierrette. So Pierrette is not the main character. Pierrette in the game actually is a non-playable character. So like, when you have in a movie, you have the principal characters that are doing all the action, and you have all the rest, the people who are just making a lively environment. Here we took a character that's a secondary character that's not even active usually. I mean, you're not even talking to her. She has no role. She doesn't exist really. She's just here to populate the place. We took this character, a woman, and we assigned her some characteristic. One characteristic is she's a companion, meaning she's going across the scene to find other people, like to find her friends. So her movement is always to cross the scene. So this way we give her a movement. And her other characteristic is she's a non-fighter. So every time an animal is going to come close to her, she's not going to try to fight the animal. She's going to try to escape. So this character is controlled by an AI in the game. Her movement is controlled by the AI. All we had to do then is to film the scene and put all the commands and the animals in the right place, etc. So it's great because here we start again with a mature rated game and we end up with an educational film about prehistoric animal for families and kids. So I love it.
They're very cool projects, and it's touching on two things. It's touching on education. It's touching on the role of women in society in general, which, again, it's a very contemporary conversation to be had. But you were talking about AI, so I want to kind of go into that aspect of the conversation. I want to talk a little about your machine learning and where do you use that? Because you're talking about her, she has a very specific role and a very specific action, that she's doing. And is every character, non-active character, trained like that? Is that how this is happening? Do you train in one AI per character, or do you have one AI that kind of manages multiple non-active characters?
So I'm not in the development of big games. I'm not
Right.
involved enough to be able to respond completely to that. But when you walk in a video game, there are some scenes that are pre-programmed, kind of. So let me give you an example. In Egypt, we wanted a scene where people are brewing a beer. Another scene where people are making bread. And for that, we got inspiration from some statuettes at the Louvre that represent those scenes. And then some historian explained to us how they were making bread and beer in Egypt. So then we
Yeah.
recreated the statuettes, we animated them to give the impression they were actually doing the scenes. These characters, they have no AI, they have no nothing. They're living their life, and it's kind of like always the same every time. Okay, but there are other characters that you meet in game that have specific competencies or characteristics, like the one I just said for Pierre. Some of them are going to attack you. Some of them are trained to react to some action. And there are so many characters in the game that we cannot control each of them. And even if we control them, it would look awkward because it wouldn't look natural. So we try as much as possible to create natural behaviors in our game. So there is the character that you control, that is walking, running, etc. And the other characters, very often, they just react to what's happening in the environment.
It's a cool way to blend the two. It's a very cool way to blend the two. All right. So, next topic I kind of want to talk about is the metaverse, and 'cause everybody seems to be wanting a part of that. Everybody wants to be in that universe, in that space. And we're talking big companies, small companies. We're talking anybody that's actually into the digital world at all wants to be there. Do you guys have plans on expanding the games into the metaverse? Are you thinking about creating the universes that we've just explored, especially the last two, the Notre Dame de Paris and the Lady
Sapiens.
the Lady Sapiens. Sorry, it's such a cool project. So, are you thinking about expanding into more of a that kind of universe?
So everybody's talking about the metaverse, and even sometimes more outside of the gaming industry than inside of the gaming industries.
Yeah,
Even though
yeah,
everybody recognizes that the video games industry is probably the industry that has the tools and the knowledge for big parts of the metaverse, because we know how to entertain people, have them communicate, have them do things, learn things, and even exchange stuff inside the game. So we already have plenty of bricks from the metaverse. None of the game, even the huge games like Fortnite or Roblox, like
yeah.
these games, even these games are not considered as metaverse today. They're huge. They've done great things about, for example, having concerts in their games, and each of them has some bricks that could work for the metaverse. I don't think one can decide to do a metaverse and be successful at it. I have an impression that at least what the video games industry is going to do is develop games that are interesting and that have the foundations of a metaverse, that can turn into a metaverse if it's successful, but that can also live their life without turning into a metaverse if it doesn't work. So that's why we launched an initiative in December called Quartz, where it's the first time that concretely, and we're the first publisher to do that, but game publisher to do that, using NFTs. So in the game Lost Recon, Breakpoint, we introduced NFTs with weapons and things that have a number, so a serial number, etc. So it's really authentified, etc. So that we do a first experiment, but a concrete experiment with our community of gamers. Not everybody likes it, because some gamers say no, we should you shouldn't add NFTs. Even some developers don't like it because they're reluctant to changing what exists. But we feel that it's important to understand this technology, make experiments, and understand the value for the player. If there's no value for the player, they're not going to buy it. They're not going to like it. But if we manage to create value because we end up giving value to the time they spend in game, because we give value to the weapons that they create, or to if they create levels and if they're able to actually sell them or gain something from them, if they can craft a character and then exchange this character, it has value because of all the creation. So if the fact that our communities or player becomes creator, if they can be rewarded for that, then NFT have a value for them. So for us, the key is not to do a metaverse, but to do things that are interesting for our gamers, to keep them engaged, and so that they find it interesting, because otherwise there's no point. Maybe we call it metaverse, maybe, I have no idea, but at least we're working on different bricks. And the bricks include maybe avatar creation and more artificial intelligence or machine learning, or more of this and that, and how you reproduce elements. But then there are also some things that we do that you could call metaverse. For example, when we released the last episode of Far Cry, the one that released back in October or November, inside the game there was a watch, Hamilton watch, kind of like luxury watch, not huge luxury, but still luxury watch. And at the same time, it was released in the game, the digital watch, and the physical limited edition watch was also created by Hamilton and is available for sale for real. So is that metaverse? I have no idea. But we're trying all those different things where you link physical and virtual, where you add NFTs. So NFT basically is just a digital economy, but one that is validated, and we'll see what it becomes. And maybe it's going to be a great solution for plenty of things, not just the metaverse. So we have no idea. Yes, of course, we're interested, but I don't think you can decide to do a metaverse. You can decide to do bricks that are going to contribute to create a metaverse, and maybe there are going to be just plenty of metaverses. And what's important is interoperability, probably, because once you're going to have your own avatar, your digital character, maybe you want to be able to reuse it everywhere, or if you earn in one place, in one metaverse, maybe you want to reuse that digital wallet somewhere else, etc. So we also need to be very open in the way we create our content and tools for that.
It sounds quite exciting, and I like your perspective that we're not going to create it. That it's just going to happen. That you're building blocks of it to kind of assemble it, but it's not the whole story. It's not the entire story. That I think it's going to feel complete from what you're saying. It feels like it's going to be complete when it's going to feel complete, but it's nowhere. We're not there yet. And but do you see this as us pushing forward into that world? You know, I don't know if you're familiar with Ready Player One.
Yeah.
It's kind of, you know, the thing, but it seems like they were living more into their metaverse versus their real lives, and all of the actions they were taking in their version of the metaverse were fully impacting, you know, they were making money, they were, you know, gaining their lives in the metaverse versus in their real lives. So do you see us going that route?
Well, look at what's happening today. Okay, we're all experimenting working from home. So working from home on Teams, Zoom, or working from home in a metaverse, it's the same thing. I mean, it's
Yep.
not worse to be in the metaverse, okay? It's just being online somehow. And if the tools are more engaging, then it's better. If it feels more like reality, then it's better because you know what, when you do your things on Zoom or Teams, etc., there's always some latency. There's something okay, yeah, that you don't get. And maybe with the metaverse, we'll solve this problem and you're going to have more the impression of being there with the person. That notion of presence maybe will be stronger. And maybe if it's in VR, it's going to be even better because, you know, when you're in front of your webcam, you never look people in the eye. Well, when you are in virtual reality, you do look at people in the eye, actually. So that's a very big difference. The other things is there are plenty of services that we already do online. For example, I have a problem with my phone. I stop by the Apple store. The guy looks at it and say, "Oh, you have to call up this number," and then the guy is going to help you with whatever genius thingy, and you're going to talk to the guy over the phone. Okay, so I'm not meeting a real guy. I mean, he could be a robot or something, some AI. I don't know who he is, okay? But he's solving my problem. What if I'm in a metaverse that's representing some kind of city and there's an Apple store and I stop by the virtual Apple store and I end up talking to a guy who's solving my problem? That's not worse than talking to a guy never going to see. It's
Yeah.
solving my problem and maybe with more realism and maybe more empathy than what I have was just talking over the phone. So I'm not in favor of living our life digitally. I'm very I like to be outside in the middle of trees and things like that. I love to
Nature,
see
the
more
sound.
people. I try to be in the office as much as I can, as much as the law allows me to be. Okay, so I need to see people, and also because I work a lot on instinct, like my intuitions are what is guiding my life. Like I make 100 decisions a day based on my feelings and my intuitions, and I go fast. And okay, sometimes I make mistake, but I need the people in front of me. Okay, so that's a
Yeah.
basic. But there are plenty of activities that where for which I don't need to have the people in front of me, and it doesn't. I don't think it's going to bother me to do that in a metaverse rather than over the phone.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point, and very well said. All right, one final question. Where do you see, because we see the impact of what you guys are doing with in the gaming industry in the museum world. So that's fairly clear. And even though they're not super accurate, they're not 100% accurate, they're accurate enough to create engagement with the visitor. Where else do you see what other markets are you exploring in terms of using your assets? Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that because I think it's a huge opportunity
Yeah.
for the gaming industry.
Sure. So I spoke already about location entertainment. I spoke about location based. I spoke about the live. Spoke about education, museum, documentary, etc. So I worked, for example, with Renault, the car manufacturer, on demos of a self-driving car, level 5 self-driving car. So the one where you can actually sleep or do whatever you want. And we created an experience that's with a VR headset linked to the data of the trip in real time. So the control, it's like a racing game, but the controller is not something that you're not using a pad to control your speed or your movement, but the data comes from the trip in real time. So the speed of the car in real time, the movement of the car in real time. So there's a perfect correspondence between what your inner ear is feeling of the movement in the car and what you see on the screen. So it becomes something where you believe completely what you see in the VR headset, and in the end, you have an impression you're flying. We did it from a marketing purpose. We did demos to journalists with this experiment, and it was fantastic. I also worked with with Air France and La Técole, the aeronautical space, because they wanted to demo the capacity of Li-Fi, the Li-Fi technology, a bit like Wi-Fi but with light. So it's data that travels through light.
Wow, very cool.
So it's going to be good to use that, in planes, in hospitals, in museums, places that are contained. So you have real fast internet, but without interference with anything else. It's good for indoor. And they wanted to showcase that at Bleu Bourget, which is the biggest aeronautic show. So we did those demos, and that also created links with the all that flight industry, and we're going to do things also probably about in-flight entertainment thanks to that. I'm also doing a few things in connected to health. So the first thing I did was with a connected toothbrush. A French startup was doing a connected toothbrush. So you have a phone that communicates with your toothbrush in Bluetooth. So the kid puts the phone in the bathroom. He has a small game with the rabbits are running, and he has an image where he sees the reproduction of the mouse and the zone that he has to brush. If he brushes the right zone, the right amount of time, and you can check, the brush can recognize 16 zones. 16, so that's a lot. Then if he brushes the right way, he gets points, and the rabbits run really fast. And at the end, he gets more points than his brother. So there's a fight in the bathroom for brushing again. We had to put a limit to 3 brushing sessions a day, otherwise they were brushing. And then this company then signed, they were distributed in Apple stores, and then they signed with Colgate. So now they're under the Colgate brand. So it's great because it's the rabbit associated with toothbrushing, which is very positive. And the game itself is the incentive for brushing. It's not a reward, it's the incentive for brushing your your teeth. Another thing that we're doing, and I love this project, it's not out yet. There was a conference in Montreal. We have lots of employees in Montreal. So there was a conference in Montreal. I don't know the general theme, but at that conference, there was a teacher from the University McGill who was working on the lazy eye disease. You know, it's those when you see kids who have a patch in their eye when they're really small. Okay, so one eye is not functioning properly, so you have to hide the stronger eyes so that the weak eye works. Okay, you push the weak eye to work. This technique does work, but it's stigmatizing for the kids because they have this patch that they have to work. And then also sometimes some adults are, it doesn't work. Someone lose some sight, again, when they're adults. And then if you discover it too late, you cannot treat with the patch. It doesn't work with grown-ups, etc. So he invented another way to work on the binocular vision. So work at the level of the brain on binocular vision using the old style 3D glasses. You know, the red and blue glasses that we had in the pack of Complex? Okay. So he was using that with a game that he had developed, but he didn't know how to develop games, so his games was boring, so kids wouldn't play the game. At the same conference, there was a producer from Ubisoft who was talking about how we create games that create engagement, and the same person can play 100 hours to the same game because it's engaging. And talking about that, at the end, they spoke together. Ubisoft offered to develop the game for him based on the technique that he had developed. And there was a startup working with us. The startup was in charge of clinical tests and approvals with the FDA and other authorities in the US, in Canada, and Europe. So they did all the clinical tests, and it shows that in 5 to 6 weeks, playing 1 hour a day, the kids are cured. They're cured. Good. And because you work on the plasticity of the brain, it remains. I mean, it's
new pathways.
And also you can train adults, which is not possible with the patch. So it's a major medical improvement. And about 2 years ago, this company, the small company, was bought by Novartis. So now we're in deal directly with Novartis, who's doing more clinical tests, and they're going to redo all the approvals and everything. And we're working on a few games to make sure that there's enough content. So this is not going to release this year. I don't have the date yet because the pharmacy industry is very slow, except when they have to do vaccines. But
except for this last vaccine, which is good.
But so it's great because and I have plenty of other examples I could give you, but it's great because at Ubisoft, when we say we want to do things that have a positive impact on people's life, entertainment, culture, education, health, you name it, we don't do things so that people talk about us. We do things because we believe in the content. We do things that are meaningful, also because it comes from the people. It's not the top management that suddenly decides, hey, you're going to do something with a connected toothbrush. You're going to, hey, go and solve that lazy eye disease, or go on and do something about the prehistoric woman. You can't do that because it's a mix. Video games also are a mix of art and technology. So it's a very specific industry for that, and everything comes from creation. And if the people are not passionate and engaged, it just doesn't work. So they have to be convinced. I cannot ask my team to do something if they're not convinced that it's meaningful.
And that is such a cool thought to close the conversation on, because without creativity, we don't move forward as a society. We don't move forward. There's no culture without creativity. We have beyond entertainment, and I'm not talking about entertainment. I'm talking about like the pure day to day. Without creativity, without having this drive, without having this drive to create these cool ideas, we're not going forward as a society. So I am super grateful to have had the opportunity to speak with you, and to see what you guys are doing at Ubisoft, and how you guys are doing it, and how you're helping with culture, and how you're using your entrepreneurship and creativity within the company to to actually benefit society in many ways. Because this rabbit toothbrush, connected toothbrush, it's such a cool thing. I would love to have that for my nephews. I'm gonna find it and get it for my nephews, because I think it'd be phenomenal just to watch them in the bathroom, kind of figure out who's, you know. And you're talking about a bright smile. I had a chance to see some of your TED talks, but it's you know, it's double benefit. It helps them stay engaged, and we have clean teeth at the end of the day, so it's great. Deborah, thank you so very much again for your candor in walking us through what you guys are doing, what your role in bringing this all together is. We're grateful to have the experience, the Notre Dame experience in our show. It's going to stay with us until it's impacting already the audiences here in Lausanne area, and the Swiss French Swiss part of the French part of Switzerland.
I visited the exhibit in November, and I was so impressed. I mean, the work that this team did is wonderful. It's so creative, innovative, full of meaning, and so different. Like every experience is different. It's really fantastic.
Thank you again. And I want to say thank you also to those who joined us for the conversation, and invite you to join us until May 1st, actually in Lausanne, for Deepfakes and its double. And if not, we'll see you guys at our next exhibition.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you, and have a great day.
Thanks.